Hey everybody, Asher here, and welcome to Kerbal Space Program 2, where today we're going to try to relive the glory days a little bit. Specifically, one of my favorite missions I ever did in Kerbal Space Program 1, which was a full-on lander mission to Laythe. Here you can see the beautiful view of Jool. Unfortunately, since this is all still in the game, we're going to do it today. However, I'm not going to do it with a big fancy rocket. I'm going to use with a rocket that I did a successful moon landing with that had plenty of extra Delta V. I think we can do it. But let's start by taking a look real quick at the planets here. We have Jool that we're going to be visiting here. You see we have the synopsis. By far the flashiest planet in the Kerbal system. Jool is a gas giant with a massive gravitational pull, something we are going to be seeing quite a bit. It is a gas giant, so there is nowhere to land. And if you want to pause, I'll leave the physical characteristics there. As for Laythe, there is a change from the original Kerbal Space Program, at least as far as I remember. Do you like gleaming oceans, sandy beaches, and breathable air? Well, that's interesting because in what I remember from Kerbal Space Program 1, the air in Laythe did exist, the atmosphere did exist, but it was very much not breathable to Kerbals. So maybe this is looking forward to some of the colonization stuff that will come later on in early access. Which I will tell you that in this mission today, we are going to have some early access fun. Here's the moon rocket. By the way, like I said, this is something that I did take to the moon after crashing Jebediah on the moon. I did send and return Valentina, so that's all very good. I think about the only thing this is missing right now is a communications device, but that's easily fixable. Although I don't have any communication satellites in orbit around Kerbal, so I don't know how effective this is. Apparently, you do get a warning if you do run out of communications range, but I don't know what that means. So here is the Delta V chart, which is a very useful thing here. And Laythe, you can see, even for a one-way trip, we're maybe short about 3,500, but let's launch anyway. That's part of the fun here. So you're going to see I do some time acceleration here, not just in the game, but in the editing. So apologies if the music is a little weird to you, but here's the launch and everything. The frame rate's been okay. I didn't have the frame rate tracker on here, but we're just trying to keep things moving here in this video. You're going to see that as a theme for some of this with the editing, is that we know what a launch looks like in Kerbal Space Program unless things go sideways, but at least right now we have the gravity turn. And this is one of the things that, once again, I'm chipping away at the rust of this game a little bit. So these solid rockets are just going. I haven't seen anything in the menus that lets me actually cut the thrust of the solid rockets a little bit. I'm sure it's there, I just haven't seen it. But we are running with some of the old school stuff that's in the game. There's a lot of new engines and fuel types to play with, but really for this mission, seriously, I was just like, okay, I've been really busy with work. I just want to play something. I had extra Delta V. These rockets all kind of work together. We know how the staging is. So yeah, I'm going to just fly to Jool. Screw it. We're going to make it. We're going to make it to Laythe. And we're going to cheat a little bit on how we get some of that Delta V out there. So you can see we are going through our separate stages here. It shouldn't be too difficult for me to get this into orbit. I do like the warp to the node area, or warp to this point on the line when the line still exists. But there is Kerbin, and there is us trying to get into orbit. So like I said, this is all very standard by the numbers. We have Tim C. Kerman and Jaeger or Yager Kerman. Note that it is 2 days into the mission. I'm not sure why it took 2 days to get into orbit, but it's 2 days in here. And here we are. So it's interesting because there are some different things that you want to do, you want to keep track of for interplanetary transfers and things like that. And now that we are out here in space, one of the things that I'm going to discover really quickly is that, well, let's just zoom out here. First off, if you are trying to go to the farther parts of the system, you want to actually burn from a proper place outside of the planet. But more importantly, there's these things we need to watch for called transfer windows. This is from Kerbal Space Program 1. I'm not sure. I'm thinking it's pretty close to Kerbal Space Program 2. So I'm like, okay, let's time accelerate. Let's time accelerate. I can't accelerate that fast because I'm currently in orbit. Oh, I should have put a puke warning somewhere. I mean, that's still really fast. And obviously, Tim and you... Oh, God. Okay. Let's take two here. So here's the planetary chart. We want to have a little bit over 90 degrees between the Kerbin and Jool transfer. That's because all the bodies are moving right here. However, instead of 90 degrees, and you can see I'm still trying to have some issues here. I believe in the original Kerbal Space Program, correct me in the comments if you want, if you were at the tracking station, you could max out your stuff even if there was a ship in orbit. and it won't let me do it here, and I'm not sure if it is an early access bug or a feature. Either way, though, we're just going to go and revert things to the launch pad, and now that Tim and Jagger are eating snacks on the launch pad, instead of reverting the flight entirely, we're just going to speed it up a little bit. Now, we do have the maximum speed, I guess, for interstellar travel and things like that. But here we go here. So that's close to 90 degrees, maybe a little bit above 90 degrees. I was honestly going for 90 degrees, so that's okay. I mean, that almost like fits the diagram there. I was doing this on the fly. I hadn't pulled up, I hadn't Googled anything. It's like, oh, let me just look up one number here, because I never really used mods before on this. So, oh, I don't say never used mods, but I never did use any of the like auto flight path things like that. I'm always doing things by hand. So, as I was saying before, if you accelerate out, you'll see that I do it from the periapsis here. Just, oh god, more focusing issues just with the camera zoomed out here. There's going to be a lot more map screen this time, by the way. But you want to fly out from the retrograde side of Kerbin to go further out into the system. You see I'm using the periapsis. This is technically not the most optimal way. I should put that maneuver node a little bit further to the left. But the idea is there. If we want to go deeper into the system, we burn out of the prograde side, the front of the orbit of Kerbin, as it were. And I'm going to get excited here for a second because I thought I had a Dres encounter or something. However, if I do, I do. If I don't, we're going to learn one thing here for early access this episode, is that these maneuver nodes are not always very trustworthy. So, just got to stretch that out. You see we have plenty of Delta V available, but there's supposed to be a Jool encounter in here somewhere. Supposed to be a Jool encounter in here somewhere. So I had my transfer window and everything right, and it's a little annoying, but I figure, you know, we could always BS this and just get out there, get into interplanetary space, and maybe put another maneuver node and make it work. You see there's still the bug where they don't have the lines actually passing through the system's sphere of influence as we're leaving, and actually we have another encounter with Kerbin later on. That's what that node means, but let's just see if we can catch up here. It's now been almost a year. We're out of communication range somehow. And you can see that we are succinctly behind Jool. Like, we missed that orbit by a lot. So, turns out 5 degrees can make a difference if you're going 90 versus 95. Or Kerbal Space Program 1 numbers don't exactly line up with Kerbal Space Program 2, which is also possible. Now, this is where you're going to see a little bit of impatience. Laziness? No, impatience. We're going to call it impatience here. Because I could have just reverted the flight and gone back to launch and tried to go all the way back here. But no, we're just going to bullshit this. We're 93 years and 95 days of flying. That's a lot of snacks being eaten. But maybe, just maybe, we can catch Jool here if we go on this side. We're pretty much on the orbital plane and everything else, and sure enough, there was a Jool encounter in there somewhere. It's just kinda on the other side of everything, so what maybe could have been a 3-year plus mission for someone who's competent at planning. Well, I mean, we nailed it. We ended up finding Jool anyway, as it were. So what's the play here? The play is pretty simple. Try to actually manipulate the maneuver node. And you can see it's still going to take 1,000 some Delta V. That's Delta V we could probably use later. But when I said we're going to try to cheat out some Delta V from this, that's because there's 2 maneuvers I'm going to be going for. One is an aero capture in Jool, and one is an aero capture on Laythe. That means that I'm using their atmospheres to slow me down and using their gravity to slow me down. So we're just going forward here to the actual encounter with Jool. But one of the things that I at least want to note here is that as we're flying, as time's going, I haven't actually looked up the details for Jool, and if I looked back on the tracking station sheet, I didn't actually see what the atmosphere height is for Jool. So we're going to be just kind of doing some science. But the first step, now that we have the encounter here, is to go ahead and put ourselves into a stable orbit. And yes, the Jool music is awesome. I mean, it's just, it's very ambient, yes, but it's also very good. So, as we're flying around a little bit, I mean, this is me being dumb. This is me trying to say, you know what, we're near Jool, I should be able to see a green thing somewhere. And for some reason, my screen just crashed. I hope that's not because the recording just crashed too. Doesn't look like it did, so let's keep going. That was weird. Okay, anyway. So getting ourselves captured here is going to take even more Delta V, but fortunately not a ton. The difference, though, is that we're going to be a lot like the Juno probe here, and we're going to be doing a very elliptical orbit. And the reason for that, first off, is just because this is where the encounter is. I probably should have done it on the encounter on the other side, but beggars can't be choosers when we're just trying to get through everything as best as possible. So here we go. And still trying to find this big green ball. That was the point I was trying to make before, and I didn't see it. We are time warps limited due to proximity to a celestial body, whatever that means. I mean, there's the sun. Where's the green gumball? Where's its tiny moons? It's somewhere. Okay, so retrograde burn, one of the easier things to do, just to go into orbit. And you're going to see again that we have this kind of weird angular orbit. And it's just going. That's the thing, is that we pulled up maneuver node, but now we're going with one engine that's not maybe as strong, and then we're going to have two other smaller engines that just kind of try to make it work. And slowly but surely, this is the kind of thing I could speed up, but some of this is just what Kerbal Space Program is. I can speed up some of it, but sometimes we just gotta watch this circle move. You can see we have an apoapsis, a periapsis, or perigee, whatever you want to call it, but we still have a lot of burning left to do. I do like that indicator at the bottom of the UI there that says how much more burn you have left to do, although once again, early access shows, says, etc. Oh, excuse me. Doesn't mean we necessarily trust it. So delete that. Note we didn't get as elliptical as I wanted here, but there we are. We are officially in the Jool system. And we're going to go from 100-some kilometers down to a little bit lower. So putting our orbit in within some of the moons. We did preview these moons in the last video, I think, like for what they looked like. And there it is. Oh, look, and there's Tylo as well. And Val, or is that, okay, that's Val or that's Laythe. Laythe is the closest one. We have all three, so that's cool. We may even see Bop and Pole swinging it out here somewhere, but I'm actually flying out here because one of the things I realized first off is that since we made an orbit here, it is elliptical, but it's not elliptical enough. I've changed it now to where we should be crashing into Jool's atmosphere. Now, if you know, you know, but you can see the target periapsis here is 52,000 meters. And you can see that sometimes the orbits of the moons is kind of changing our maneuver nodes as well. And that's just one of the things you have to deal with the Jool system, is that gravity, kind of like real life missions, things are not that spread far apart, and gravity can really disturb things here. But there's more moons. We do have them. And here's just a nice view of not quite 2001: A Space Odyssey, because this isn't Jupiter and we don't have an AI robot on here. We just have Tim C. and Jarger now on year 9, day 289, saying, you know what, we finally found it. We're finally here. Makes me, I think it's the book Revelation Space, makes me think of where they ditch a mission, or they defeat a mission by saying, okay, well, we're going to shoot them out to Jupiter. They'll never make it back here in time. No, that couldn't have been Revelation Space. That's another book. But, oh man, Alistair Reynolds, I wanted that series to be better, but it was good at first. But yeah, just the idea of, you got to remember, we have not actually put a manned mission out to Jupiter, just like we haven't put one out to Mars. This is long distance space stuff. Fortunately, our Kerbals are green, so I'm assuming, like this planet here, the radiation isn't really much of an issue. Although I am curious, and there's just a nice view. Just a nice view in general. I am curious if we are going to have to play with radiation a little bit here going forward. Obviously, there's a lot of other forces. We're starting to go into the atmosphere. We're at 200 kilometers and boom. Right away. Okay. Well, fortunately, this is early access in our early forays, and I'm not sitting here trying to be super cool and saying, okay, we're going to do this in one shot. That's for later. For now, we're not playing for keeps, we're playing for science, and that means that we're going to adjust our angle of entry, angle of attack, angle of anything else. You can see that the clouds here look a little bit better than the ones on Kerbal from high up, but once again, my graphics card is the one listed for the minimum spec requirements for AMD. And honestly, one of the things that's disappointing to me, whoop, we died again. Apparently, going in too fast with too high of a time acceleration is a problem here, but the clouds look nice from up high, but up close, we kind of get some dead again. You see, it's great. Tim C and Yager are going to continue to have just their issues with trying to get an arrow captured instead continuing to be brought back from the dead. Are they clones? Do we know? Is it just different timelines? I don't know. My point being is that we are actually now hitting a periapse of like 138,000 meters, and we actually do get arrow captured. The problem is that we're trying to get to Laythe, and while they're not being totally destroyed by the atmospheric forces, we are now trapped within the planet's gravitational sphere and its clouds, which unfortunately do not look as nice as I've seen up close on other people's stuff. So, Arrow GUI. I bring this up because, first off, it's a nice menu to have, even if it's unfortunate that the developer bound it to the same hotkey as Steam's default screenshot picture or screenshot hotkey, meaning that my initial screenshots for the game, I'd have to like hit it twice and hope the Arrow GUI was not on the picture I wanted. I then changed the screenshot button to F9, which is the quick load button in Kerbal Space Program. Totally didn't make that mistake at some point during this recording at all. I changed it later to Control Z, which also is a terrible idea. I need to figure out a good hotkey. Anyway, the Arrow GUI is nice because it gives some hard data on when the atmosphere starts, and it's something that, since I was kindly reminded from trying to take screenshots in the game, that I should really use this as a tool to say, okay, where does the atmosphere start? You can see I have a periapse of 181,000. My guess at this point is that we want to go somewhere, but not too far deep below 200,000. And although I wasn't going from memory before, sitting here now, it's like, yeah, that seems right for a gas giant. So sure enough, we get under 200,000 and we start to get all kinds of crazy numbers moving on the Arrow GUI. Hopefully the recording resolution is enough here that it does actually work. You can see that we have static ambient temperature is a little higher than I expected. External pressure is a little higher than I expected. The speed of sound is moving around. That's one thing that people don't realize, and one of the things that we've had to learn a little bit more from observing on Mars in real life is the speed of sound. It really depends on atmospheric conditions. And Mars's atmosphere is kind of so splotchy and spacey in a way that the speed of sound can change quite a bit. But anyway, we're here. We are getting an arrow capture. That's the good news. And it doesn't look like we're crashing into the planet. It doesn't look like the Kraken is rising from Jool and eating us today. Although it's hard to blame the Kraken when I'm the one that's diving too deep. And we have an encounter here. Is that a Laythe encounter? That'd be great if it was a Laythe encounter. Is it a Laythe encounter? It's not a Laythe encounter. It's a Val encounter. I mean, I can live with seeing Val. Val's a nice place. I don't know if I have the Delta V to land on Val, because this mission was entirely contingent on using the fuel I needed to get to the moon, budget cuts we'll call it, and instead getting to one of the distant gas giants in what is now a 9-year mission, 10-year mission almost. And that wasn't a Val encounter. That was a Tylo encounter. Shit. Or things just moved around. Now, here's the thing about Tylo. Tylo eats spaceships. At least in Kerbal Space Program 1, Tylo is essentially a Kerbal or a Kerbal equivalent. It's the size of Kerbal. It's the mass of Kerbal, pretty much. It just has no atmosphere. In Kerbal Space Program 2, what I noted in the video before and what we'll see here again, is that it does look like a big chunk of iron that's just big and scary. But, you know what? if that's the encounter we have, at least we're not being eaten by the planet. Maybe I can use some of that extra gravity. There's Laythe, by the way. Come back. There's Val. I don't mind you. There we go. Val and Tylo. The closest we'll be seeing Val today, probably. So there's Tylo. And I think to myself, you know, why don't we just mess around here? And what would it take to actually land on Tylo? A lot. And you can see I panicked there a little bit. Some of that's bugginess from the pause menu, and some of that's just me hitting buttons because I don't want to fly through things. So we have a lot of speed to cancel if I want to actually land on Tylo. And you can see getting some kind of landing is going to take way more fuel than I have. Way more fuel than I'd have even if I hadn't had to do that second adjustment here. So once again, even though Tylo has plenty of gravity and no atmosphere, orbital mechanics are a thing. However, you can see here that I made a discovery. Once I figured, you know what, Tylo's not going to help us. Tylo does push us with kind of a gravity assist a little bit. Is once again, my screen is just flickering, and I don't know why, but we have a maneuver node up here. Now, remember when I said before, don't always trust the maneuver nodes? I hadn't learned that lesson yet. So I'm just going to play with this a little bit. We're going to find that Laythe encounter because I know it's there. We just have to get out of the sphere of influence of Tylo. Right now I just keep putting myself on crash trajectories. We don't want that. So there is a Laythe encounter. And you are going to see some creative zooming here to see where I can get this to work. We're going to adjust a little bit to see if I can get that encounter to pass through the part of the sphere of influence I want. I really do like this feature of Kerbal Space Program 2, even if it does need to be fixed in how it's implemented here. Specifically for this reason, I can try to draw a line and say, okay, this is how I want things to go. However, it's weird that I can't, like, go this way. It just, eventually it disappears and I crash into Jool instead of getting an encounter. So, little bit, nothing. So I figure, once again, you know, let's just use the encounter that we get. And so I'm at the maneuver node. It's only 101 delta V. I have 500 some fuel left. This is not a bad situation to be in. Obviously, Tim is excited. So just a little burn here. Just a teeny, tiny, there's no Laythe encounter. So, here we are again. Looking out, you can see, am I going to angle it right? I don't know if I'm going to angle it right to see. But what it turns out is that Tylo threw my ship off of where the encounter node was. So, honestly, I was burning well beyond the midnight oil at that point and said, screw it, let's do this for another day. So if the volume's a little bit louder here, that's I apologize, but that's just a function of the settings seem to reset every time I restart the game. Yay, more early access things. But I do find an encounter with Laythe. And after some fiddling and no longer using maneuver notes and manually burning, and man, I really need to remember what the name is of these 6 little directions on the SAS controller, or on the nav ball here. I should know this. But all I'm trying to do is to make it so that we can slide right into the Laythe atmosphere. And sure enough, in 40,000 meters, I can probably go a little bit lower than that. But that should put us in the atmosphere. My gut, my memory says it's 60,000. Once again, for some reason, the atmosphere characteristics, like the atmosphere height, I didn't see that listed on the planetary statistics in the tracking station, or maybe I just missed it. So we're here, and hopefully me refreshed, renewed, 15,000, 16,000. That's definitely enough for an aero capture. Hopefully not so much that it completely rips the ship apart. But here we go. Remember when I said we were supposed to get to Laythe? Yeah, it's almost 10 years. 10 years of flying. I mean, a lot of that was on the launch pad. We're going to use the Aero GUI first this time, just so we can get some more data that the game is happy to give us anyway. As long as I don't fast forward too fast and end up in the middle of the atmosphere and then immediately explode. Because that never happens in Kerbal Space Program when you time accelerate. Also with the volume higher here, I've heard other people point this out, but I really do like the ambient effect that sounds like a film reel running faster when you speed up or slow down time. I mean, obviously that's not how time acceleration works, or is it? But it is a really nice effect. So we're sliding on in. Laythe, the watery planet with the now, it's a sequel, it's breathable atmosphere. Call that a retcon, or call me incorrect. That wouldn't be the first time. But I do like putting myself over here just to be like, okay, let's do this. I think I tried to get a screenshot, but for some reason when you press F2 to hide the UI elements, it does not hide the arrow GUI. So anyway, here is Laythe, and it's very pretty, and it's very nice, and it's full of water, and not full of vegetation, which I'm curious if that is something that will eventually be able to be changed in Kerbal Space Program, which while Kerbal Space Program is focused much more on space exploration than like terraforming and stuff, this is just sandy beaches, and there's our arrow GUI that forever persists, so there goes my picture. Alright, well, the good news is that our ship isn't being torn apart, and we are not crashing into Jool anymore, we are crashing into a habitable planet. Alright. And you're going to hear the music go a little bit faster here, because you know what? We know what this drop down looks like, and it's not just going to be a drop down, it's going to be a splash down. And I'm really nowhere near land. Hopefully, Jurger or Yeager, I'm not sure how you'd pronounce that, especially since it's a her. But there's the glitchiness, not glitchiness. It's just the graphics not looking too great with the clouds here. It gets caught in the strings here of the, I almost said umbrellas, of the parachutes. That's something that's fixable. But here we are, splashdown on Laythe. Easy does it. But, you know, I didn't want to just splash down on Laythe. Actually, my golden memory here of Kerbal Space Program 1 is a land landing, so that's what we're going to do. But when I reload the game, and I did save it from when I had that really close encounter, you can see the maneuver node changed. And it's going to take some trial and error and some guessing checking, but I definitely was not at 800,000 kilometers away. So I'm going to spare you all. Every time that I did have to reload here, I had to go and fiddle with that and fix it. But you can see, once again, we tried to go a little bit lower. Here's me quick loading. Going to show you again here that even though I had an encounter and we were clearly intercepting here, we look at the maneuver node. Don't trust a maneuver node in early access, I guess. I'm going to have to repeat this process again and again because we're 837,000, but trying to move things in a little bit closer. Here is obviously one of our fixed things. It'd be really nice to have that line run through the planet, but here we are. Time accelerates, slow down, because we don't want to warp ourselves into the middle of the planet, but here we go. A 36,000 meter encounter. And we're just gonna slide on in. And this should be good, right? Just pretty nice with the atmosphere and everything else. We're moving in pretty well. I tried to set up my orbit so that it would line up over the continent pretty well. And there is the target landmass. You can see that the atmosphere is starting to pull us a little bit, and it's kind of shoving me northward. But this looks like this could be the one. This looks like we could be on land. So here we go. If we can just start to drop down. But there's a problem here. This is called a skip transfer, if you're unfamiliar with the term. We have dipped into the atmosphere just a little bit to skip off the top of it. And you can see that while we are getting, like, captured by Laythe, we do have a Laythe orbit, I didn't go deep enough. So that means that I don't exactly know where I'm going to end up, and I do know that I want to end up on the daylight side. So I'm going to do this again, and this time we're going to dive in a little deeper here. But the other thing I'm going to do is just make sure that, just show you all how I adjust my orbit here using the nav ball. This isn't with maneuver nodes. I did do a little bit of trial and error because I always forget, like, well, which way do I need to burn to make it work? It's just a little bit of fuel. We actually have We're going to be very fuel efficient here, let's call it that. We're going to use every bit of fuel we got with us. This is not a return trip. This is one way. Tim C. and Yerger are going to have a great time living on Laythe forever and eating snacks and going to the beach. But you can see now we are at... We know 38's too shallow. 31, probably not too shallow. You can also see I adjusted my staging here. So the parachutes are lower here. Technically, that's because, you know, if I'm going to be landing on land and not concerned with the splashdown, there's no reason for me to eject the remainder of my ship. So here's the very familiar series of coastline again for Kerbal. Not Kerbal. It's not Kerbin. It's not Kerbal. That's the sun. It's Laythe. This never gets confusing at all. So just flying in, it's gonna work out. This has got to be it. I've only recorded about 2 hours and 20 minutes worth of footage that I've cut down here a little bit. So this has to be the one, right? Right. Okay. Also very interesting. The aero capture is shoving our orbit not just towards the ecliptic. That's not the word I'm looking for. Not towards the equator here. And I actually don't know if Laythe has an axial tilt or not, but it did change our orbit. But fortunately, we're still looking at land. So here we go. Our inspirational Laythe music. This has got to be it. We are going to be landing on the land. Don't make me panic map mode by just shoving me suddenly onto... I mean, the coast is fine. Coast is pretty. There's a lot of coastal real estate on Laythe. But, I mean, I'm a little concerned about that one tiny... Oh, there's Jool. Hey. Jool and Kerbal. But of all the places I could land, it would be really ironic with all this land and all this setup here if I just end up in that tiny, tiny lake right there. Now, granted, it's tiny from up here. I'm sure it's a lot bigger once we get on the ground. But we have a bunch of sand dunes and structures as well, which does make me wonder, is this going to be kind of a flat landing or not a flat landing? But the good news is that we are hitting land. We aimed for land. It only took it took a few tries, but we are hitting land. So I actually get to deploy the parachutes without ejecting the rest of my ship. This was something where I did have some problems in some of these replays. For another early access I've seen people talk about is that sometimes the decouplers do not decouple. The separators do not separate. I think that may have been what happened with in my first video where all of my fuel was used in one stage when it shouldn't have been. But anyway, we're here. We are landing on land. It looks like we are going to bypass that tiny lake, so that drama is averted. And although Jool is not sitting on the horizon, Jool is sitting nearby. And this has got to be a Sony Vegas issue, because this is the third or fourth time here that I'm doing this while showing it through my video editor and going, oh my god, I don't remember how to extend legs with a hotkey. Let's do this now. These legs obviously were enough to land on Duna. I mean, how hard can it be to land on Laythe? We have 2 parachutes here. But I can see the screen. Tim and Jurgens can see the land, or Yerger. I should know how to pronounce this. So parachutes deployed. Here we go again. This is all working out. 700, 600 meters, 500 meters. Those dunes suddenly look a lot flatter, which is very interesting. All right, so 500 meters. I'm not going to accelerate time at all. Once again, I could speed this up, but part of Kerbal Space Program is the time it takes, and we just gotta enjoy the moment, enjoy the grace and grandeur of making a landing on our first non-Kerbal or non-Kerbin planetary body. I mean, it's a moon. It's not like we can land on Jool, but we can see our own shadow, and it's not going to kill us this time. So here we go, falling in 14.8 meters per second. Almost there, 100 meters left. Parachutes could be doing a little more right now. Thonk. But it's a landing. It's not like we were planning to leave anyway, so okie doke. We're going to extend the ladder anyway, because why would you not? You put a ladder on there, you're not going to not use the ladder. So there it goes. Don't remember how to close the part UI, but There we go. Hey, OK Idea 2 is on a crash trajectory. Yeah, I guess so. And then there is other planetary bugs here where the camera will go through the bottom of the planet. I'm sure that'll be fixed later because it makes it really hard for me to get a screenshot from the land surface with the Kerbals and Jool up in the sky. But the important thing once again is that we are here. We're on the land. It's all very good. Just a happy little hop. Happy little jump. And you know what that means. That means it is time to plant a flag. It's very exciting. I mean, I know this is technically me replaying one of my favorite things from Kerbal Space Program 1, but it's satisfying to struggle so much and then get the Laythe landing maybe 10 years too late. Best 10 years ever. I mean, they're the best of friends. Obviously, they've been sharing snacks and not killing each other. But here we go. Flag up. Red alert. It's a happy time. So we can see maybe one of the other moons, but definitely Jool and Kerbal in the distance. And yeah, I'm going to call that a successful mission since I was never planning to actually return. And there's a little bit of the camera through the ground. Once again, fixable, but early access things. I do try to point out what early access kind of quibbles that I have, but at the same time, I'm enjoying this game so far, and I'm looking forward to doing other missions, so I am happy to take suggestions for what you all might have, as I just want to give you some perspective of how big that lake is and how far away we are from the beach. It looks like we have a little seashell or rock-looking thing over there. If we could do some science, that'd be great, but here we go. Jurger Kerman. I called it Jurgen for so long. And Tim C. Kerman, who are all okay on the OK Idea 2. So remember, OK Idea 1 went to the moon, which I actually don't have there, but here we go. OK Idea 2, we're here. This is Asher. Thanks for watching. This is Kerbal Space Program 2, and suddenly we're realizing, oh crap, we can't get to the snacks. Can anybody roll over a spaceship? Oh no. Thanks for watching. Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments. We'll do this again with another fun mission. See you, I can't talk. See you next time.